the Giulio di Tolo.
So there I was, sitting on the church pew, waiting to go on stage, and my heart starts beating out of my chest. The beats were so hard and fast that I can hear them ringing in my ears on each beat. The podium I was about to start speaking to over 100 people from was swaying from my dizziness and probably blurred vision too. It was almost 5 years ago today that I was about to start speaking at my grandmother's funeral, who died after a short fight with brain cancer, when I started feeling what I'd felt countless times before, the start of a panic attack. Let's rewind a couple years when the panic attacks first began. So the first time I experienced one, I was walking to Charing Cross Station from Whitehall after I'd just given my apprenticeship graduation speech. The speech went well, but maybe it was the adrenaline or the celebratory cigarette, but the same fast beating and dizziness occurred. I was so baffled and scared, I spent the next 2 hours in Embankment Gardens contemplating whether I felt brave enough to actually get on the train, circling the same 2 square metres over and over like a chicken with a broken leg, much to the amusement of the nearby tourists enjoying their fish and chips. So the panic attacks might have been a surprise to me back then, but now I see how inevitable they were. The 3 years prior to this were a combination of bad habits and bad decisions. So for anyone who doesn't know, panic attacks occur due to subconscious beliefs and fears, such as the fear of losing control and collapsing in front of other people, or of physical symptoms like a fast heartbeat, or that you're going to have a heart attack at any moment. I'd grown up with quite severe anxiety anyway, until I was about 16 and I discovered drugs and alcohol. The next 3 years were my attempt at using these new innovations to finally cover up the anxiety that had plagued me my whole life, chasing highs to avoid the lows. Now, as I'm sure you all know from pretty much every Wall Street and mafia film, this technique doesn't work, and highs don't actually cure your anxiety, it still lingers underneath. Not only that, but my fear of dying had now been fast-tracked by this new fear that the drugs were causing heart issues, creating the perfect cocktail for panic attacks. After finally working this out through therapy, I decided to go all in on self-improvement. I'd dabbled in a few self-help books before, but this became my new obsession. I read every book, watched every YouTube video I could find on habit building, fitness, psychology, philosophy, anything that would put me closer to the person that I wanted to become. I built every self-help habit into my life, from affirmations in the mirror to meditating to listening to audiobooks at 2 times the speed. Yes, I am publicly admitting that I tried positive affirmations in the mirror, and no, not everything Tony Robbins tells you to do is worth your time. But I did start to see results, and it felt good. So let's fast forward to the funeral, when I'm sat waiting to go on stage and I feel the start of a panic attack. So I'd been in therapy at this point, but I didn't feel confident enough yet to deal with this situation. Then, as I was looking around at all the hundreds of people I could embarrass myself in front of, I realised something. So my grandmother came to this country when she was 20 years old. She was from a tiny village in Italy where she wasn't taught how to read or write in Italian, let alone speak any English, because she had to work from a young age. She had nothing when she came here. She had to deal with xenophobic people and work any job she could find, from factory work to in a kitchen. But whenever she would tell me about her life, she said she would always say to herself, tomorrow is a new day. No matter what happened, no matter what problems she encountered or people she would face, she'd say, tomorrow is a new day, and that got her through. Along with the rest of her family, she did this all for me. So I thought, I'm going to at least go up there and start speaking. I thought to myself, I'm okay with collapsing for her. She would do it for me. So I walk up, palms shaky, heart thumping, eyes blurry, stand up behind the podium, and I spoke the first line. The whole time I have one thought in my mind. I'm okay with collapsing for her. She would do it for me. Whoosh. I felt calmness lift through my body. The panic had gone. I went through the speech with relative ease for her, and I was fine. I didn't have a panic attack. I didn't collapse. I didn't have a heart attack. just by no longer resisting the fear of collapsing, finding meaning within the suffering, the panic attack had passed. It was in that moment I realised the power of beliefs. Something my grandmother also loved to do was to walk. Annoyingly, usually after we had eaten a big meal, which was quite often because we are Italian after all. So a big 4-course meal of homemade pasta followed by meat and potatoes, then cold cuts of salami and cheese, then cheesecake and ice cream, and she'd be insistent on going for a long walk, much to our dismay. But she had the right idea. It's going to come as no surprise to any of you that when I started my self-improvement journey, exercise was a main pillar of it. I started lifting weights and building a better physique, which instantly improved my confidence. I took up running, and I remember my first run, I told myself I was just going to go out and run a 5K. I thought I played football growing up, and yeah, it'd been a few years, but how hard could it be? So I throw on an old t-shirt, download Map My Run, open the door and shot off in excitement. 8 minutes, 1.5 kilometers later, and I'm walking home out of breath with my tail between my legs. I joined my local kickboxing gym, and I stuck to it all. I scheduled time in my calendar every week to run, lift weights, go to kickboxing. I created a flexibility and mobility routine. I read every book on nutrition I could find and created a meal plan for myself that met all of my nutritional needs, which I stuck to most of the time. I mean, I am Italian after all. So something we talk about a lot in the self-improvement world is the power of compound interest, because it feels so fitting to us. We spend so much time doing difficult things with nothing to show for it, and then all of a sudden it seems like the positive benefits seem to happen at once. This seemed to happen to me quite recently after I just moved to Dartford in Kent and I heard about the yearly half marathon. I'd just finished a tough training session on the Friday night, but I told myself, and the race was the Sunday, but I told myself if I felt well enough on the Saturday morning, I'm just going to sign up. Now I do run, but I'd never run more than 12k before. And anything over 7k was a very rare occurrence, yet this was triple that at 21k. I didn't know what my pace goal would be or if I could even run that far without my joints breaking. Nevertheless, the morning came and I signed up. So the morning of the race, and I packed my running vest full of more gels and sweets than anyone would ever need, and I set off. My goal was just to keep up with this group wearing running club t-shirts. And I did it. My time wasn't breaking any records, but I was astounded at what my body was capable of. I was achy the next day and the next, but by the third and definitely the fourth, I was fine, no injuries or niggles. I'd just run an impromptu half marathon. Now, although I'd just run an impromptu half marathon, I knew that this absolutely was not an overnight success. And if I'd have tried to do that at the start of my journey, I would have been seriously injured, maybe even died. But all of my tough cardio workouts, all of that time spent in the gym, that extra 20 minutes on a Friday night while my friends are out, and I'm working on my knees and my Achilles and my tendons to be a better kickboxer, it had all compounded. 4 years ago, I couldn't run 8 minutes without getting out of breath. And now I'd just run a half marathon after signing up the day before. It was in that moment I realised the power of health. Something my grandmother also always instilled in us was the importance of helping others. She was more empathetic than any human should be. We couldn't walk past a homeless person without expecting a few minutes of detour because she'd have to find something to give them. She knew that when she came to this country alone, she wouldn't have been able to create the life she has created without other people helping her. She always told the story of being stuck in an English airport overnight, lost and confused when all the flights were cancelled, but a stranger helped her, explaining and translating. She'd have been lost without him, and she was full of stories just like this. As I mentioned, I took up kickboxing on my journey, and after about a year of training, I started competing. Now, kickboxing competitions means long car journeys, waiting around in sweaty sports halls for 7 hours to get around 15 minutes of fighting, even less if you lose. One particular competition, me, my coach, and 2 other fighters of a similar age drove up to Northampton. But when we arrived, it became clear that we had just been invited to boost the confidence of the home fighters because we weren't getting any decisions no matter how clear they were. So 3 fights down, 3 losses, and the next division started. The nature of competitions also mean that you can get multiple fights back to back if you're unlucky just because of the way the ordering works. And you can also get a fighter that's much taller or much shorter than you when the weight classes aren't done correctly. I'm sure you can guess by my stature which one I'm more likely to get. So 5 fights down, 4 losses, and I now had my last and final fight, which would be 3 back-to-back. I honestly had not 1 ounce of energy in the tank left. Just bending over to pick up a gel and squeezing it in my mouth felt like climbing Mount Everest to my arms and my delts. I look over and my opponent is at least 6 foot tall. As my coach is giving me the game plan, I can sense the sympathy in his eyes. I knew I had to get some energy from somewhere, or I would risk getting seriously hurt, maybe even knocked out. So, with barely enough energy to speak, I look him in the eye and I tell him what we say is our goal each training session. I'm going to leave everything on the mats. I'd read about commitment bias before, how publicly committing to a goal means you're more likely to execute it. And maybe it was the mild concussion, but I thought that if I had nothing left physically, the mental pressure of making a social commitment to someone I respect is all that could take me through. So, I stumble into the centre of the ring. The referee gives a signal. The fighter approaches, towering over me. And from some place I've never been to before, I find the energy to counter him with a sidekick. I heard my team roar. Again, the roar got louder. Again, I had never been this tired and still been able to fight, but their support and my social commitment was pulling me through. I held my own that fight, and by some miracle, when the fight was over and the judges revealed their scores, I lost. That journey home, we moaned about the judges, but we also laughed and told stories and left feeling like a bond was created. I may have lost the fights, but I gained something much more profound, because it was in that moment I realised the power of community. 6 years ago, my life consisted of chasing highs on the weekend, then being riddled with anxiety in the week. I was constantly in and out of unhealthy relationships. I couldn't run 8 minutes without getting out of breath. I was depressed, at the whim of the next panic attack. Today, as I stand before you, it's been almost half a decade since I've touched any hard drugs. I've been a competitive kickboxer, I've run a half marathon, I've recently completed my first high rocks race. I've reached millions of people through social media by sharing my journey and lessons that I've learned. I've become an accredited mindset coach and helped clients work through the limiting beliefs keeping them anxious so they can build discipline in their own lives. I've took the leap to go self-employed and recently become a homeowner with someone I love and admire. And that's why I structured this speech the way that I did. Because after all the self-help books and affirmations and confidence hacks, you can throw most of it away, because 90% of my results came from these 3 pillars: community, health, and beliefs. But then it struck me. It's taken me 6 years, 150 self-help books, many black eyes, countless podcasts and hours in the gym to learn what one 84-year-old Italian factory worker figured out without any education or ever reading a book. Help people, walk often, and remember, tomorrow is a new day. Thank you.